Okay, we're going to be talking more about what public administration is. In the last lecture, we talked about the differences between the public sector and the private sector. And so I wanted you to see that there are many similarities in both sectors, but there's a big difference when it comes to the public sector, because what we do in the public sector is that we govern. So remember that word. We're going to be talking about it quite a bit in this particular course, governance. Okay, so the learning objectives for this particular lecture is that we're going to be defining public administration, what it is. We're going to be defining governance. What is governance? We're going to be defining the role of management, and we're going to be defining the role of leadership as it deals with public organizations. So basically, you're going to be looking at it in two ways. We're going to be saying there's a political environment that we need to deal with when it comes to the public administration, but we have to have the skills that are needed in order to govern, in order to implement laws, in order to carry out those functions of any organization. Okay, I want you to look at this video. It's a little YouTube video, and it's kind of cute, and so it gives you the definition of public administration in just 2 or 3 minutes. So watch that one and then come back to this to the lecture. Okay, so let's talk about governance. I used that word a minute ago, governance. All right, so the private sector differs from the public sector for many different reasons. And in the first place, let's talk a little bit about the similarities between the public and the private sectors. We need the skills for both sectors, and these skills involve the ability to lead people, the ability to do those things, and we're going to be talking about open systems and closed systems much later in the course. And so there's things that you have to do in any kind of organization in order for the organization to be able to run. And so the difference in the public sector, though, then is that we have this political environment that we need to work around, or we have to work within. I guess that's a better way to say it. And so basically this is what it's saying. Everything that's done in the public sector is done because there's a piece of legislation that says you, public sector, are going to be implementing the laws that are passed. And because we're going to be using taxpayer money to do this, there's going to be other issues that are going to be involved in the public sector that are not involved in the private sector. And some of these different values include, we covered them in the last part, but these include things like equity, responsiveness, cost effectiveness, because we're talking about people's money, and more than anything else, accountability. So let's talk a little bit more about accountability. Okay, so this is kind of the way that it works for a public sector agency to be accountable. There's kind of a checks and balance type of situation. So a law is passed by Congress. And so the law says we want to go ahead and do something, for the country, because we see that the country is having problems. So let me give you an example of how this is going to be playing out. I want to talk about the welfare reform that was passed, well, kind of a long time ago. It was passed in 1993, 1994. It was around the time that Bill Clinton took office. But around the same time, we got the very first very conservative Congress to come in. It was the 104th Congress. And so they came in and they said that they wanted to have a social contract with America. And they said, we do not want to have people on welfare forever and ever and ever again, because that's the way it used to be beforehand. Whereas if a woman had a child under the age of 18, that woman could stay on welfare for the rest of her life. Well, as long as she had children under the age of 18 and there wasn't not a man or provider in the household. So this Congress comes in, and this is with the one with Mitch McConnell when he came in. This is Newt Gingrich, John Boehner, all of these. It's that class that came in. And so they said, we're going to change it. So the law that they passed said women cannot be on welfare forever and ever and ever again, or forever and ever. So we're going to change it where there cannot be on welfare any longer than 5 years consecutively and no more than 2 years at one time. And they cut many of the services. Okay, so they passed it, then it went to the executive branch, and the executive branch said, okay, we're going to go ahead and implement this, and they implemented through the institution called the bureaucracy. And we'll be talking a lot about the bureaucracy because that's their main function in life, to implement the programs that are passed by Congress. Okay, so then the checks and the balances that come in, so Congress passes the law, it goes to the executive branch, the president signs it, the president will implement it because the bureaucracy is part of the executive branch. Then Congress will come in and say, okay, well, we have to look at it and see how these resources are being spent, if they are being misspent. But more than anything else, we have to see if they are meeting the intent of the legislation. And in this particular instance that I was giving you, the intent of the legislation was to get women off of welfare. Okay, so the actual definition of public administration then is kind of twofold. There's the administrative part of it, and then there's the political part of it. So the administrative part of it is that these are the processes, organizations, individuals acting in official capacities to carry out laws made by legislatures, executive orders, and courts. So let's break this one down. That's saying a lot. Everything that we do in the public sector is based on process. And process is important for this reason. When laws are passed, somebody's going to be disadvantaged. But as long as the laws are passed and they're viewed as being legitimate laws, even though that you know that it may negatively impact you in some way, you're willing to pretty much live with the law until they can change it, or if they ever change it. But you're willing to accept it at least. Okay, so it's the process and this visibility, this transparency that we look at to say, are these laws being implemented in the right way? And so that deals with the processes of how these laws are being implemented. So the way that they do that is they look at the organization or the public agency, and they're looking at the individuals and how they're carrying out these particular laws. Because people that work in the public sector are charged with the responsibility to carry out laws. No one else can do what they do. Only they do because they work in a public agency. So that's their official capacity. And so everything that we do in the public sector and these programs that we need to implement are come from different sources, or basically the different political institutions. For example, the legislatures that pass the laws themselves, and the public sector implements them. Executive orders, and the executive orders are presidential executive orders. And this is when the rules and the regulations are changed, or they come about, they're new, and so they're given to a bureaucracy, a public agency, to change the implementation based on the rules of and the regulations. Then the courts themselves will also have a role to play when it comes to public administration. And again, all of these are checks and balances, because if there is a law or if there is an executive order that appears to go against our constitutional rights, then the court has the right of judicial review to review that, and they come out with a decision. Yes, you can do that. No, you cannot do that. Okay, so let me give you an example of these. I'm going to give you an example of immigration, and that's not a very popular topic, I understand that, but it's probably going to be like the best example I can give you. You know, we've had not too many immigration laws, but the one that had the most impact was in 1986, and that one was actually passed while Ronald Reagan was president. And Ronald Reagan was reputed to be like the best Republican president in the history of our time so far. We'll see how that plays out. But anyway, okay, so he worked with the legislature to get this Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act passed. That was the last time that there was any type of amnesty programs. And so everything was kind of coming along, not great, but anyway, so there's, I'm not saying that we do not need to reform the immigration laws. They need to be reformed, especially due to many of the things that came out under the Trump administration. So now I'm going to tell you what President Trump did using his executive orders when it comes to changing the rules for a law that's already passed, that were found to be unconstitutional. when it comes to immigration, when President Trump was campaigning for office back in 2016, he came in and he said that he wanted to go ahead and make America great again. And so basically, that was part of saying we want to stop any type of immigration. So it wasn't just like undocumented immigration, but it was also people that are coming in under the different visas. So you have the undocumented. You have about maybe 5 categories of legally getting here, being able to legally get here, including if you're educated and you in a job, like the faculty that we have here or in any institution for education, they come in under one of these visas where they have to be sponsored by the university, and it takes probably like maybe 6 years for them to get the so-called green card. But he wanted to stop that too. These people include like nurses and doctors and computer tech specialists, so he wanted to stop all that. So then it goes to but the undocumented ones are the ones that got the most attention, because I'm sure you are familiar with what was going on at the border, where he was taking the children away from their families, the separation of the children from their families. So this one went to court several times, and the courts found that to be unconstitutional, because even these undocumented immigrants have constitutional rights under our Constitution here in the United States. And they told Trump he could not do that anymore, Well, anyway, so it kind of went on for a while, and the courts finally got together and said, no, you have to reunite all of these kids. Well, as it is, as of today, as of the recording of this particular lecture, there's over 500 children that they cannot find the parents. So it turned out to be a major mess. I don't know how else to say it. And part of it was because the institution that was supposed to handle this was not able to do that, because their capacity had been diminished due to many of the cuts that they had in under the Trump administration in all of the public agencies. Okay, so those are the types of processes that I'm talking about. It's also an academic study. You can get a PhD in public administration. My PhD is political science, and my main area is public policy, but I also have an area in public administration, which is why I can teach this course. So it's an academic study. It's the way that you get trained, you get professionally trained, and this is called a Master's in Public Administration for public sector careers. Everybody's heard of an MBA. Well, this is an MPA, a Master's in Public Administration. So you will get a lot of the skills that they do in the business school, but you learn how to do it within the political context. And I'm not saying that agencies should be politicized. I'm going to argue that they should not be politicized, but there is a political context, and you need to be able to negotiate within this environment. We're going to be so therefore we have to look at the politics. We have to look at the different theories and the practices that govern the public agencies. We have to look at the Constitution itself, because everything that we do in the public sector is based on 2 different parts of American politics. And this is the U.S. Constitution. What the U.S. Constitution says that we can do, as a public sector, providing these services. And then what American federalism. And so I'm going to be doing a section on the Constitution and American federalism, and this thing called intergovernmental relations. Intergovernmental relations, and this is kind of what they call federalism in action, or these are the people that actually do it. I mean, they're the ones that get things done, that get the different services, or work with the different agencies to get services delivered. Okay, so who all is involved? Well, when it comes to the public sector, public administration, you have the cabinet level appointments through the president. And we're talking about the top levels. And so this would be the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary of the Interior, those types of positions. And then you have the deputy ones under those. These are considered to be political appointees because they have to go through the advice and consent process. And so the president will recommend somebody to serve in this particular position, and then the Senate is the one that confirms this. So these political appointees serve at the pleasure of the president and can be dismissed at the pleasure of the president. They do not have any type of job security. They do not have tenure. They serve at the pleasure of the president. Then we have the career civil servants, and these are the jobs. These are people that work in jobs that are more merit-based. So you have to have the skills needed, the training needed, the education needed in order to work as a civil servant. And some of these jobs would include people that work like in human resources, or they might work in budgeting. You know, you would need like a degree in accounting or public administration. You would need people to do policy analysis. They would need a degree in either public policy, or they would need a degree in public administration. So these are career civil service, or even like if you're talking about like the Environmental Protection Agency, and I'm more familiar with that agency than any of the other ones because I do environmental politics. Okay, so you have to have like scientists, you know, to do that type of work, or the OSHA. You have to have people that have that type of scientific background. Okay, then we have these this what we call the stakeholders. And so because we deal with taxpayers' money, you have to have people, or there's going to be people that want to have a say in what's going on. And so these are called stakeholders, and these include people that that are citizens, or they are members of interest groups, and interest groups may be like the National Rifle Association, the Sierra Club, you know, groups that people join, and they have like a lobbying arm of their agency in order to try to have an impact on how laws are passed. You have a couple of different subsystems that we're going to be talking about, and I'll be covering a section on that. And so basically this is what it's saying. People that govern do not govern in a vacuum. Because you're using taxpayers' money, there are other people that are going to be involved that you also have to take into account. And the way that you do this is through these advisory groups, or these boards. Okay, so what these advisory boards try to do, and a lot of times they're called citizen advisory boards, or you can apply for it, especially with the city. I mean, you can apply to be on an advisory board with the city, and a lot of times they're advertising saying, citizens, would you please serve on this board? And so what happens is that they will take people's comments, and so people that want to serve on these types of boards will do so because they will try to influence the way that the policy is going to be eventually passed, what laws are going to be passed, and how they're going to be implemented, how these laws are going to be implemented. Not only that, these citizen groups also the interest groups, they will perform a watchdog function, and that's another way of saying this, that they're watching to see what's going on. If they think that there's some type of like mismanagement, or if there's like a misappropriation of funds, or if they think that they're not serving the population that they need to serve, they bring that out to light. And so these are people that that work, or they network outside the formal structure of the institution or the constitutional structure, and we call these the non-institutional players, and they interact with administrative agencies. And so the agencies themselves, the bureaucracies themselves, are charged with the responsibility of reaching out to the citizens and listening to what they have to say. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Okay, so then when it comes to the administrative part, okay, there's skills that are needed. But this course is going to talk a lot about the managerial role, and it's going to talk about the leadership role. So the public management is the field of study of practice that emphasizes internal operations of a public agency, what goes on inside the agency. And some of these concerns that they have, if you're a manager, it would be, you know, how to plan, how to organize, how to maintain the organization to keep it running smoothly. What types of information systems are we going to have? And cybersecurity has become such an issue within the last, maybe 3 or 4 years. It's kind of a big deal right now because there's too much hacking, too many malware hacking and stuff. Budgeting, of course, personnel, performance evaluations, productivity improvement. So a lot of these things are common to both the public sector and the private sector. So that's the managerial role. It's the things that you have to do, and again, working within an environment of governance. Okay, then we're going to be doing a whole section on leadership. And so, you know, the question is there a difference between being a manager and being a leader? So we're going to be talking about leadership, and leaders are usually the ones that provide more direction and vision to an organization. When we cover that module, the leadership module, I'm going to be giving you some skills tests for you to be able to evaluate where you are as a leader and where you might decide that you want to go. So that's kind of the way that this course is starting to be set up.